And also, please take a look in the chat because I already sent you a link, which is important for our meeting today. So we'll have today 3 points for the old business and 3 points for the new business. The first 3 points, it's about policy, the workflow, and the strategy. And the new business points are about, and here is the main or the central point today, you'll have 15 minutes to read the strategy document, which I posted in the chat as link. After that, we'll have 10 minutes to discuss, to put questions to Bogdan, which is the author of this document. And of course, it will be a moment when we'll really appreciate if you start writing directly there suggestions, changes, especially Silona, we are expecting from you any idea or feedback or idea to delete something or maybe to not go into a direction and something like that. And we'll close with the communication channel update. So let's start with the first point, Marcin. It's about policy. What you can tell us about the evolution in the last week?
So we're starting the first network working group meeting next week, and that's that's what will happen next. Like we try to organize ourselves and see what kind of audience we'll have. Michael also created lots of or some channels on Matrix so that we can have like an open communication channel with developers, and we're discussing how to make it effective so that we effectively use it and actually start using it. It is a challenge because we've been working in a very different style. So like not every discussion was public, and that's non-trivial change.
Definitely, yes. So thank you very much, Marcin. If we can help, please don't hesitate. Yes, Christian.
I was just going to add, I'll do the communication channel update based off that. So I've also tried to publicize it on my end. We're going to put it in the Intersect newsletter too, Marcin, just to try and get more attention to that. But we're also going to change the Discord Slack channel into an announcements only for the committee and move over to Matrix and try to adopt that and see how that works for using it as the committee channel.
I'm not really sure if advertising this dev channels to the communities is the right way. Through Intersect, like saying, I would avoid actually pumping it and getting not the right people. I think a much better approach is actually mention these things in our contributing guides, where developer look for sources where they can discuss things with people that are making the progress. And I think that would be a better approach. Slower to get people to onboard people, but I think it would bring better quality or better audience. The audience we are actually would love to see. So other developers.
It feels like the first thing should be to try to move people over from the IOG internal Slack onto this, right? I mean,
as well, yeah. And it's I had a little bit different idea how to do that. Michael has a very more strict idea how to do that, and there are people around who
Let's see
Or
what
the
thinks
people.
Silona. It seems maybe has the third opinion. Please, Silona.
Yeah, so what I was just going to say is what we should do is kind of the open source norms in regards to this, where all of these things should be listed in the README .md for all the different pieces. So what we do is we have our own GitHub repo for OSC where we can start putting all of this information in. And that way we're not accidentally locking it behind Google Docs and things of that nature. And so we have it all in GitLab and we start doing things in Markdown. And then we post all the different stuff in the READMEs, just like we would post the transcripts of these meetings and do things along those lines. And that that does what you're talking about, Marcin, but it does it in a less confrontational manner, in that the people who are coming at least know GitLab or GitHub. And so they know how to do that. And so that's how you make sure that things are developer, but you don't hide it anywhere. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
exactly. That
where,
what I was
we're
thinking
talking
about.
about obscuring, don't please, that's a huge negative. And I'm just trying to help you with vocabulary in regards to that. But if you do things like put it in the README, put it in the different things, do some of those normal setups that you would do in Git, then we're doing the norm that an open source project would do. And it gets rid of that kind of conflict.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Silona. Marcin, if I understood well, the main point is to separate the channels and not to mix the channels which are dedicated to the technical people with the channels which are dedicated to marketing people.
So
this was the initial idea.
So my idea was that if we have a separate channel for network, like network committers, that is tied to actually people who were given commit rights. So it's still open. It's still governed by the maintainers or Intersect in some way. Then it's something in between being completely open and doing what we're doing right now. But it's also a trap, because whatever we choose to do, it will be difficult to make the other step. So I'm not like fully on either side. And I see that moving to completely open channels is a challenge for some even senior developers.
Yes. So what I think, Marcin, the first point is,
and I'm worried that even if we try to do that too hard, then people will organize themselves to anyway speak privately and avoid. So that's why I'm thinking like maybe it's a good idea to actually have this step in between. But yeah.
Yes, Nicholas, please.
I think one relevant thing is that, for most of these projects, there are already a notion of internal and external channels within the IOG Slack. And so the suggestion would be, I think you're totally right. You try to push everything public and people will just be, no, I'll just, create a private channel somewhere else. But potentially the point would be to keep the internal channels potentially, but at least move, say, the IOG public channels to being public channels. I suspect would find a lot less. That would scare people a lot less, moving like the IOG ones to being public. And yes, people will still have their own internal development channels.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Silona, please.
When you sit there and say the IOG channels, are you talking about I'm trying to figure out where you're coming from in regards to that, because a lot of times when you're going to do an open source one, I wouldn't necessarily call it an IOG channel, right? It would be an Intersect channel, because one of the big problems that happens in open source often is if you have one company that's the only one that's controlling the open source code, and it's the only one that has the maintainers and because I saw this a lot at Hyperledger, right? Where like at first IBM like dominated everything and they had to slowly open up, and then Sawtooth never opened up and they got put away. So when it comes to things of that nature, it's be careful, because what you don't want to sit there and seem so IOG dominated on it, where it doesn't seem like there's openness to other people coming in. But what you do is you start off with all the maintainers. They will be all IOG at the beginning, because I'm assuming those are all the people who have the actual expertise to be the maintainers. And then what you do is you publish a very clear path from transitioning from being a contributor or a watcher, or somebody along those lines, to becoming a maintainer, and you have a clear path for that. And so one of the things that IBM was very proud of with Fabric is that they were able to make that less IBM dominated. And so we could actually, do those pieces.
Yeah, that's excellent point. And actually, the networks stack is right now maintained by IOG and CF. So it's which is a great start. It's not just a single company. Yes, Carl has been working with us for a very long time, but he's now on the CF side and has a different, he's presenting a different voice.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marcin. Anyway, I envision a movement, a transition, maybe in 2 steps. In the first step, let's apply what all of you think is better. Let's measure and see if you are in the right direction between private and public, and then move to the public when the solution it proves it's a functional one, and the people's are delighted, and the communication is fluent, and you have feedback and everything you expect in the group. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much again. Thank you, all of you. I will reduce the time. So I put here 20 minutes because it's already passed. And I will use only 1 minute here to give more minutes here. So from our point of view, we are working on the 4 points. The first one, it's about the structure and model and structure for the governance. I just want to show you in 1 minute, Silona, I put the definitions for the entities involved in the OSPO governance model and structure, as you suggested last time. And I added in our document, I added at the end a glossary with all the definitions of the terms we are using in our document. And I intend to do that for all the documents we'll deliver, just to have a common ground and the same definition of the things. Of course, it's a working document and anyone can change here. There is no stress at all from this point of view. Yes, I forgot. Happy International Woman Day. Happy Silona. Thank you very much. You are here with us.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm rude. I forgot to say it at the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you.
So, in fact, I hope to have finished the 2 documents I prepared about the structure. Not only, so you see, we have not only the diagram, we have also associated a document to this. I hope to finish it today and next week to be available for the first review in our multiple reviews cycle. And I also create the first draft document for the functional reporting areas in delivery assurance. All the links will be sent to you on our channels, and you will be able to read and give us your very precious and expected feedback. So we'll move on the central point of our discussion. Sandeep, Bogdan, if you want to say something, I think Sandeep is not here today, if I'm not wrong. No, Sandeep is not. So Bogdan, can you make just a short update what you did this week in the direction of the document? And don't forget, I put a link in the chat. It's at the beginning of the chat today. Bogdan, do you want to say something, or we can go directly
sure.
to read?
Yeah,
Please.
sure. Just before starting on a small observation, you put 20 minutes on the point 2 on the new business, but actually it should be 10 because otherwise will be more than 1 hour. So if you
Yes.
count the minutes, is exceeding the. Anyway, so speaking about the strategy document, first of all, thank you to Michael, to Nick, and to Sandeep, who already inserted some comments. I went through them, but somehow I hold myself to respond directly before or to each comment before having a full picture of all comments. So if you agree with this approach, good. If not, I will take one by one and give back some feedback. I was thinking that it's better to see a common voice first and then seeing what emerges from this point. Also, I observed that this feedback was mostly, and actually I expected to be like that, mostly on the content part, because this is the most interesting part. So wasn't on the general framework and model, which is the groundwork, was on the next stage where actually the content of mission, vision, and so on. Which is good, but on the same time, we need to lock down the framework before starting to populate the framework. So one key point for me will be to ask your feedback about this foundation model first. If you agree, if you think that it's something that should be changed, adjusted, and so on. And once we have a strong agreement, let's say, as strong as possible on this foundation model, then to move on the content side. And please, if you don't agree, just speak out. I don't know. Do you think that it's a good approach like this?
Which document are we operating off of? I wasn't quite clear as to which one you were talking about.
It's a Silona,
link.
it's a link in our chat. I put it a link there at
Oh,
the
okay.
beginning of the chat.
Okay, so
This-
it's the open source
this is-
strategy document.
Exactly.
Yeah, this document is the long version of the presentation that I did last week. Everything that was presented last week is in this document. I know it's a long thing, like 70 pages, but I will say, in my opinion, not very hard to be read.
So if you agree, Bogdan, we give the time to the colleagues, these 15 minutes to take a look and read it, okay? And then we'll continue the discussion. So what Bogdan said, maybe you can focus on a structure image of the document and approach the first one. Yes, it's correct, Bogdan?
Yes, it's correct, but on the same time, I'm not sure that 10 minutes are enough for
No,
thoughtfully.
definitely not. It will be not enough, maybe an hour. But what we expect is to have a first feedback now after these 15, 20 minutes. And after that, the colleagues will take time based on their calendar and agendas and will give a written feedback inside the document. Okay?
Do,
It's just
do,
to open the process.
I'm asking everyone actually, do you think that it's an efficient way to use our time to stay here and read together, or can be an
No. It's not
offline
reading
mode?
together. It's not reading together. No. Each
Okay.
one is reading. We'll make a pause. I will stay on the screen. I'm not the beautiful one, I know. But anyone can close the webcam and start reading the document, and we'll meet after 20 minutes. Okay?
Yeah, the goal is to do it like Amazon. It was Michael's
Yeah.
suggestion. Just private
Okay.
reading, and then we discuss what we read.
Okay.
I recommend starting on
Really.
And we want to
page
start
11.
on page 11, or we want to start at the.
Everything up until page 11 just explains the framework of how we're going to frame the strategy. But I think for our input, page 11 downward is where our focus kind of tends to be. I don't think we've had any discrepancies on the framework. Unless you see it otherwise, Bogdan.
Yeah, so I will say
So are you,
starting with the first page or the second page, something like this.
so some of it is, some of this seems like it's all of Intersect. And so are we running it through all of the membership at Intersect? Does that make sense? Like when you're sitting there and you're doing something like mission, and vision and core values, is this just for the OSC committee, or is this for all of Intersect?
It's about open source in general. What means where we are going to go, and so on with the open source inside of Cardano world, let's say. This was my understanding, at least.
Okay.
I think it's intended to be that, but definitely some of the bits need to be narrowed because some of the scope is way too wide for for that.
Yeah, because you can cause accidental political issues being too broad, right? Because we don't want to do top down, right? And so we want to sit there and say, hey, here are the things. And so one thing that's really important is it's okay to go off in committees and create things. That happens all the time. But it is important to make sure that things aren't too solid, so that you can go back to the community and make sure that you get all of the buy-in and validation. It's a really important aspect of change management for doing that. And so, so it's good that we're doing that, but we have to be careful when we say things that are overly broad, because some people will come in and view that negatively as overreach. Especially, it seems like in this community, everyone's kind of new to open source and kind of new to being as collaborative as they need to be, because some things are so, y'all have so many bad actors in crypto and just crypto in the cryptocurrency world, that I see a lot of insular behaviors that don't necessarily always exist in the rest of open source. And so we have to be, I think, a bit cautious on that, if that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you.
Barcelona, can you point me on the, I don't know, the place where you think that the things are going too broad?
Well, at the very beginning, right? Because when it sits there and talks about the mission and the vision portions, in regards to that feels like it's trying to tell the Cardano community this. And it's like, well, if we don't have everybody in the Cardano community here, and we're not necessarily saying that we're going to present the entire Cardano community, we need to be careful as to how we word that. That's what I'm saying. So like at the very beginning, you know, we do this in regards to Cardano, we do this in regards to Cardano. You know, are y'all the only source of open source for Cardano? Because I don't believe that right now that is true. I mean, it is true for the core, maybe saying something about Cardano core and the fact that, you know, IOG moved everything over into the GitHub repos to be underneath Intersect. But there, do you see what I'm saying? Like there's some wording in there that's a little awkward.
So if we speak specifically about the mission and vision, this mission and vision, they were in a longer form, let's say in several documents that we are provided with. The only thing that I was trying here on the first page, when you see mission and vision, it's a shorter form of what we were provided with. So the only thing that I did was to propose a foundational model, the framework itself, and then come up with some proposals about how this framework can be populated according to what we already have.
Yeah, so a lot of these contents are from original drafts when the committee was stood up, so they're not very accurate per se for where we want to go. So a lot of what Bogdan put in there is stuff to be debated and talk about, and so we refine it. So yeah, like what you're saying with the terminology, Salona, it's definitely not what we're aiming for, and that's where we need to discuss and refine it.
Gotcha.
But again, this first page here is like an executive summary, is the most appealing part, let's say, and maybe this is the reason we start to focus with this section. But maybe in my opinion, will be better to challenge, to adjust the model itself. Maybe we don't need a mission and vision. So looking to the model, to the framework, we might decide that a mission and a vision doesn't make any sense for open source initiative. So in this case, if we erase them from the framework, they will be also erased from the content.
Well, one thing, so one of the things I did is, like, when I was at IEEE is I went through and kind of did a breakdown of all of these on the multiple levels, because like doing the project that I did at IEEE, it was often confusing to people because they're like, IEEE is huge. You know, it's, 420,000 people worldwide, blah, 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 blah. SA is another subgroup underneath that, the standards portion, and they're about 26,000 people, right? And then SA Open was the new thing that we were launching. And so one of the things that I did to help make things clearer is I went and I harvested the mission, vision, purpose, core values, goals, strategic plan from all three of those groups and put them together so that people can sit there and see, oh, here's the overarching one for IEEE, here's the SA one, and here's where the SA Open fits in. And it might be good to look at it from that perspective. So that way, when you're creating those mission and vision statements, maybe if you have the overarching ones that you can go and grab off of the internet or something along those lines, then you can more clearly articulate, oh, here's a Cardano one, here's an Intersect one, and here's the OSC one, so that people know that you're not dictating to a larger whole without consulting with them first. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, sorry, Christian, go.
I was going to say, I'll get those to you, Bogdan, from those three levels. I think that makes sense because I don't know if we want to sell ourselves as the open source gurus for everything, but this is our best approach of how we're doing at least the Cardano open source project, or core Cardano.
So
Yeah.
if you look, for example,
Cardano on that, Christian, I would start saying core Cardano rather than Cardano, because that makes a good code distinguishing factor in regards to it, where you're sitting there saying we're trying to be open to all the dApps and all the other different groups that come out and all the different projects that come out of Catalyst, and maybe they come over to Intersect and maybe they don't, but we want to make sure that they understand that they can, and that there's going to be some kind of support mechanism, or maybe there isn't, but we should be clear on that aspect. Do you see what I'm saying in regards to Cardano versus Cardano core?
Yeah.
If you look to the section where is what isn't strategy, under this isn't strategy is a section Cardano strategy versus OS strategy. When I was saying that actually the OS strategy is something different than Cardano strategy, but this OS strategy emerged from Cardano strategy or core Cardano strategy, whatever. So somehow we are in the position to be dependent by the upstream strategies on Cardano level or even Intersect level. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that these strategies are defined at this moment, or at least I didn't find any references, or I don't know. So in my opinion, strategy, it's a top-down approach. So we need what is on top to be able to define what is above, or is below.
Let's go ahead and actually start the reading, do 10 minutes, because I
Yes.
think 1 minute a page will actually get us good context, because we're talking a lot on the framework itself, actually. To your point, Bogdan. I'll go ahead and start a timer.
Yes, please.
Sebastian, you joined just as everybody went quiet because people are reading the open source strategy document, which is probably not in the chat for you because the chat doesn't store history, but I will send another link to it. People are currently reading through that.
Hey everyone, I'm a bit late. I had to wrap up other stuff. Reading something? I just see.
Yes, yes, Sebastian, there is a link in the chat, and
Yeah.
we have around 10
It's true.
minutes to read the document and then to discuss a little bit with Bogdan, which is the author. Thank you very much.
5 minutes remaining. Okay, time's up. Hand it over to you, Bogdan.
I didn't get past page 1. But you have a lot of notes now. Don't worry. I'm going to go through the entire document and do this everywhere. So it is
To
what
be fair, I think page 1 I didn't read at all, but it seems like a very concise summary. So probably would have worthwhile to be reading that one first.
Well, as long as we get as enough comments as Bogdan wrote, I think we're in a good place.
I think you just terrified Bogdan. No.
Not at all.
I want to say something. I read along. I didn't put it down yet. I think what you have been doing, Bogdan, is, I guess, very helpful to anyone who needs to build a strategy. If it is about the open source web stream on an Intersect, or if it is for anyone or individual project, I think it's great if you can harness this into something as how to build a strategy. What is a strategy in the first place, right? If ever we want to ask from a project committee or anyone, now build up a strategy for the project or kind of come up with one, I think this is very good. On the other hand, and also kind of Michael's comments further down more and more resonated with me in saying, where are all these kind of values, these things coming from, and why aim so high, and what is it actually what we are capturing here, right? I mean, we've been like discussing for a couple of months, I guess, now with varying attendees, right? So maybe it's not something, maybe it just didn't move over from like people who were there before and now people which are here right now, but like the values we, for example, already had in like kind of this governance policy, right? This is kind of the first document which we wrote. I think it was already quite a deliberate. It was the first thing which we wrote down, like kind of the values and principles and so on. It would be great if we would be like kind of picking that up again, or rather amend what was already be done there in order to exchange anything, rather than just to have a parallel world where this doesn't show up anymore. And yeah, in general, I think, I'm not sure, right? Are we creating a strategy to rule the world here? Or, I mean, what's the scope really, right? I think I think it would be very cool if we could just be a bit more concrete in some things. That's my thoughts so far.
Yes. 1 second, Silana, before. Yes, you're right. I totally agree. But this principle regarding the input and the output, I tried to populate the framework itself with some content. Again, my knowledge is very limited. It's very hard, and to be honest, I struggled a lot to put something meaningful on the content side, a good mission, a good vision, a good set of values, and so on. So I read thoughtfully to all the documents, and I tried to extract different things from different places. But again, as I said before, this content side, mission, vision, values, goals, and so on, I'm not so confident on them. So they are super open for discussion. Please challenge them, because I try to make them
Bogdan,
down.
Silona raised her hand.
Yes,
Please,
I said Silona. Sorry, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to sit there and say, by the way, one of the reasons Tam asked me to consult on this is I'm basically I'm actually going through and moving all my 23,000 ADA over to a wallet that'll work with all this and do everything, to join Intersect as a member, to attend all of the different committee meetings. Because one of the things that I see happening is y'all are overlapping a lot with each other. Like, everybody wants to be discussing the mission. Everybody wants to be discussing the vision and their objectives. Everybody has all these there's a lot of parallelism going on right here. And so that's why I sit there and say it's okay to go off in the committees and do these things, but we need to make sure that we need to engage with all those other committees as soon as possible, because the problem is if y'all both get things that are all too much done, it'll be harder to like knit them together after a certain point. So we do need to make sure that we're like engaging with everyone across the thing to sit there and say those different portions. Because like I said, I saw some stuff happening in regards to the civics workshop. I know that similar conversations are happening on the ecosystem, and on the ecosystem level, I know that they see themselves as going Cardano as a whole, and they see this group is, do you know what I mean? Like we're having some soaping conversations, just like you're saying, Sebastian. So that's what I wanted to bring up, is that we also need to make sure that on this document, we talk about some of the scope for it, so that we don't appear like we're overreaching in regards to it. And that way they know that they can come in and work with us on this, and we can advise them on that, and things can go back and forth. I'm going to try and do that on my annotations for different documents, to sit there and tell each other, hey, go look at da-da-da. But, you know, I'm not going to be perfect at it. But at least maybe we can get something like that going forward in the next 2 months.
Associated to that too, within the delivery assurance function, I'm going to try to draft out the difference between the vision committee, technical steering, and the open source, and where they remit, and just draft it so that we can start discussing it with those committees, to your point, Salona. Because there's a lot of, the TSC can't do everything. The vision committee still needs to be defined, but the open source committee, we're already running, but we're just advisory. We need to go to a decision-making status, but where does our scope for such actions and things? So,
and we need to be transparent about who is the decision-making groups, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times in open source, it's connotated by the name, and that steering committees are the ones that typically steer. Advisory groups advise. Working groups create some kind of deliverable, or task force create a deliverable. Working groups create ongoing deliverables. Task force create one-time deliverables. But you know, there's like some of those different things that are tied assumptively to the titles in regards to it. And like right now with some of the different ones where it's like vision committee, I come in from open source and I'm like, like I don't know. I don't have an assumption as to what that means. While if you say, you know, the technical steering committee, I know what that means. Marketing steering committee, I know what that means. Community steering committee, sometimes I know what that means, but that's pretty variable in a lot of open source projects. So it's like, and most don't have them. So it's like, okay, you know, so yeah.
What we're doing here is open source committee. Okay, it's kind of more like advisory, I guess, right? Or is it not, right? What's the mission? And I think, or I would have thought so. And if I read the currently published charter, it is, yeah, we are an advisory body. That's it, not more, right? We ensure levels of quality or guide and help in maintaining them. We have some ties to, I guess, the technical steering or the granting, like funding areas, right? Where you can't get this level of grants or that kind of engagement, for example, if you don't follow that kind of quality assurance, which is advised or so. So there is some interconnections, but I think it's not the goal to kind of, and it was I think this was also what Pat, in the very beginning, often, we have been brainstorming all directions, right? He always said, yeah, hold on the horses, right? Is it really in our backyard that we need to discuss this and this, right? Or not, right? Just rather start something somewhere concrete. And I think what we picked as a very concrete starting point was kind of creating a bit like these open source practices, these kind of how to manage the projects, what are necessary things needed to kind of do the open source process and governance processes. I think these concrete things has been what we've been doing in the past. And now the question is, do we need to have this overarching like 5-year strategy plan on what open source committee does? Maybe not, right? Maybe Intersect should have a strategy, but not this committee or not the program office. I'm not sure. I've been also asking what is OS now here in all of this document, right? The strategy for open source is right. Yeah, open source, we can't give the strategy open source, but this is a worldwide movement. And we're not here to create a strategy of open source.
Yes, Bogdan, you raised the hand.
Of course, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I just thinking of what Sebastian said, like it's purely only advising, not taking any decision. Again, I'm pretty new to this world, and it's just a question. Even if we talk about the open source direction, how the open source will be concept itself, this strategy of open source isn't on this committee side to decide, to advise, and who is going to take the decision.
Well, I can say the purpose for the committee being stand up was always to develop a strategy for making Cardano open source, because it's always been mostly contract private development or center company contributions to the code, and now they want it to build bigger base for people to contribute and own Cardano as a whole. So getting a strategy to do that will help us in the long run, because if you look at the COO's view and a lot of people at Intersect, they don't think Cardano's successfully open source at the moment. And that's where the strategy comes in to improve that. So that's why the committee was formed originally. And to your point, Sebastian, the determining on whether the committee becomes from advisory to decision making comes down to the politics of it too. If we're going to write policies and try to ratify them, we need to have some decision making ability. Or do we fall under the TSC, and whenever we can fit it on their agenda, then we can start enacting things? So it's just those politics to play. I do think we're going to be an advisory body to a lot of things, but basic open source practice, we could set up, this is how Intersect does it, stuff like that.
Yeah. I have one meta remark, right? I think the documents you produce, they should be following the practices we want to advocate for. So I think we started in like having this Git book or this open repository, which Michael really started. Whatever we do, I think we should always try hard. I mean, this is now me advising, right, to maybe you guys in the program office. But I think none of this is super secret, right? And if it is, ask yourself why it is secret that you put this down, which is, well, it's our plan to rule the world, is maybe not good to say publicly, right? But rather a proposal thinking, okay, this could be a nice way forward. If we would have this as a public document, I think it would be already much more in the spirit of all this. And that being said, we have this Git book, right? This is the current charter. This is, as it's currently defined, the open source committee. And to some extent, I guess, also the open source program office, right? And what is written there is the truth, and we need to amend that if it should change. And so I think any work in kind of building out goals concretely, or different set of values or principles we want to follow, actions we think we should be doing, I think those items should then go into there to say, yeah, this is now the new truth, right?
Yeah,
and we
well,
should
the
basically
strategy
then vote and discuss on the new truth there rather than here, maybe.
to clarify that too, at the very bottom of that Gitbook link is the draft strategy. And that's why we put a date on the interim committee, because I wanted us to get starting thinking of the future of the committee now. So that way, once the interim thing ends and we have to vote for the next seats or re-election, stuff like that, we already know what the next step for the charter is.
Yeah.
And we can evolve.
So,
I can't see a link to this document, which we just had read.
yes.
Okay, didn't
I
see that.
give you again. Yes, please.
I'll
I will put it at the end of the chat.
I'm also going to pin it to the Discord
Here
as
is.
well.
No, I mean in the public document, right? Not in this chat or the Discord. I mean, okay, Discord is maybe public. Matrix would be as well, but I mean the starting point, right? What is the starting point to all the truth about open source committee? Where is the truth starting? In some chat, in some date-bound message? No, right? In the current established charter, right? If it can't be discovered from there, it's not truth. Okay, it's a draft, but yeah.
It's in GitHub. I think I just got to turn it into a PR. That's the only thing.
That would be very cool, right? So I would much rather try to establish a process where we kind of ratify any changes there rather than in some Google Doc, right, which I can't find back either.
Well, that's where we had two approaches. We have GitHub for the developer intuitive people, and then Google Docs for people who are just kind of contributor based and don't understand it that well. So
it's currently not covered that there is any. We don't recommend right now to use any document like Git, Google Docs, right? We say something public, findable, and reviewable, right? In that sense, and maybe this document is public. I'm not sure. Is it?
yeah, everything's public.
Okay,
Nothing's
so it's
secret.
public at least.
Links to
But it needs to be
everything.
links and discoverable, right? So that's maybe my point then.
I can republish it. I've been doing on LinkedIn and everything else. It's just whether people are actually looking at the threads for it.
So one thing that GitLab does that works really well, because even though they're a corporate entity that basically has complete control over their code base, but they're open source, has a much better reputation than GitHub does, is because of the fact that they have one handbook to control them all. And it's in Git. And of course, it's in their own tools. And so and they use it for both their employees as well as the volunteers and contributors and things of that nature. So everybody knows how everything works. And so I know we want to be decentralized, but by having some space where we can centralize is really important. So even speaking to what you were talking about, Christian, in regards to, we don't want to gatekeep on some things for people who are not developers. Unfortunately, Google Docs still does that, but you can just make sure that there's always cross linkages everywhere so that everything still maintains findability and everybody knows to go to Gitbook. Everything's going to be posted under this open source committee folder. And then they know, oh, that's where it might not be there, but there's going to be links to the meeting notes. There's going to be links to the chat. There's going to be links to the documents. There's going to be, that it's just that centralization of findability. It's not necessarily everybody has to be on the same thing, but they do need to know where to go. And that's one reason why at the very beginning I typed in README, because in the open source world, when in doubt, read the manual. And so that's where to go for that is something in regards to the README. And then of course, to be accessible to everyone else, website-ish. And so the Gitbook serves that kind of purpose of those two major places of, the website, the Git repository, and now we know where to go. One reason I like GitLab over GitHub, I'm biased, let you know that right now, is because they have the GitLab pages, which makes it really easy to publish all of these different things without having to always go through the rigmarole of all of the other publishing problems that you have. So you can actually keep those things a little bit more in sync a little more easily.
I really like your drive to GitLab, because this is the next thing we also, at some point, this committee needs to talk about, right? GitHub is not decentralized. Putting everything on GitHub is not decentralized, right? We need to be able to also host, and it's perfectly acceptable, should be, that if some of these projects just live on GitLab, right? Or on Codeberg, or on some other SVN based, maybe. It doesn't need to be Git even, right? So as long as it follows the principles of open source and this, our values and principles are honored, and any policies are kind of followed, everything's fine, right? And so I think it's nice that we are also kind of then challenging, right? Maybe is GitHub the right thing, or maybe GitLab, doesn't matter, but you should follow the same.
I don't have a hat in here. I feel like I need to put on another hat. Salona's GitLab hat is first of all, GitHub harvests you for their AI. GitLab does not. And GitHub is not secure. One of the things I've been complaining about for a very long time. So I actually wrote something similar to GitHub back in 2004, where I did my own distributed ledger with Mercurial and Merkle trees. And GitHub has never gone past SHA-1. And there's also some big problems in regards to their CI/CD. And so now there's getting insertions of both forking and malicious code and no verifiability in regards to what you're getting and downloading. This is the same thing that killed SourceForge. I don't know how many of y'all are old people like me that was on SourceForge and almost had a project killed by the shenanigans that went on there. But, I've been like banging this drum for well over almost 2 decades, for a long time, I guess about 15 years. And that this isn't a secure way of doing these things. And we need to be careful, because we can, have malicious inserts if we're not careful on how we handle the CI/CD issue. And it has not been handled correctly on GitHub. And there's some if you go and Google, there's some articles out there right now that talk about the fact that this is a problem, and yet somehow it's not on all the major stations. I think you can find. I think I saw it on the registry, but you know, it's definitely there and it's definitely happening. So
maybe it's just because it's owned by the biggest corporation of the world, right? That's why they have many people who can take care that things are not so public.
Yes.
Still biggest.
don't like hearing that the emperor doesn't have clothes on. So, you know, yeah, that's where we're at.
So thank you very much, all of you, for your feedback. I think we can close our meeting for this week. Just expect to see you on the next week and help us as usually. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend and see you all next week. Bye bye.
Thank y'all.
Bye. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
And
Bye-bye.
Christian,
Thank you, Solana.
thank
And
you.
happy Women's Day.
Yeah. Hi, Selena.
Christian, you saw the link to my Calendly, right?
Yeah, I set one up for Tuesday for you. I included Bogdan and George because we're all needing your expertise and where we're going.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm here. And you know, I told Tam that the entire time I'm doing all this, I'm really going to be working hard to not have the opinionated Solana hat on. You know, I couldn't help it on the GitHub thing. But
No, you're
Solana,
good.
for
Solana, excuse me for interrupting. I just put a link on the chat about Socrates.
Mhm.
That would be awesome for you to take a look at and will help a lot to the group. We are participating in Odin, which is a group that is putting together Socrates to get consensus in Web3. So this will be very, very, very important and interesting to see how that can be adapted to what you guys are doing.
yeah, so I've seen some of this before, but I'll go and check out this specific one. But yeah, because I was friends with the whole Holochain project from its very beginning, and then I'm friends with a lot of the people that are doing some of the more out there stuff. Like one of the things I was suggesting to Intersect is that they think about doing something in regards to participatory budgeting, which I kind of got involved in back in 2004 when I did my DLT with Mercurial and Merkle trees. It was for the Transparent Federal Budget Project to actually go through and allow the